welcome to everyone. If you're new or been here lots of times, you're so welcome. You're welcome no matter what your socioeconomic situation is, if you're rich or poor, or what your skin color is, or what your sexual orientation or gender identity, or really anything. Boy, that sounds like a Bible verse. Can separate you from the love of God. And you're welcome. Wherever you come from, and whatever kind of situation you come from. Who your parents were, any of that. We're just so glad you're here. I'm going to talk a little bit later about unity and diversity, and I want to explore with you what that should look like, or what it could look like. And before that, we're going to have a really unusual, for a lot of you this would be unusual, way of doing an opening. Logan's going to come, and why don't you give a little bit of an introduction to what we're doing.
Sure. Woo, Logan! Woo!
Well, hello. Most of you I actually do not know, so this is exciting. So my name is Logan, and 4 or 5 years ago, in probably a period of time where I would say probably where I was in a deep sense of questioning all things spirituality in any way, shape, or form, came across a podcast about what makes a text sacred is people. People picked the books of the Bible that we make up and primarily read, i.e. if you're Catholic, there are more sacred texts in their minds than standard evangelical Christians. And when it came to that, it dawned on me, wow, so what makes a text sacred is what it's saying to me, what ability it has to speak to me. So you can watch a clip from a movie on YouTube, and it can move you in a certain way because of what that clip is telling you. Or you could read a section of scripture, and it can move you deeply, and the person next to you could be like, that's BS. There's no truth to that whatsoever. And both emotions are completely real. Probably the most fundamental practice of where we think about a text being sacred and thinking about it differently or allegorically would be Song of Songs, right? It's probably just a story about sex. But for some people, they see God in that story about sex. So we have a unique opportunity, and we have them throughout church history, through many different religious practices, whether that would be Christian or Jewish. Those are the primary two, but there's also Buddhists, there's Hindus that have different practices. So we're going to be exploring one of those today, which I'm super excited about, and it is called contemplative imagination. So just to give you a bit of a historical context of it, and I have to read this because I did not memorize it. So this was made famous by St. Ignatius. And he was mostly known for being a Spanish knight, and he was injured in battle. And he came across a book that invited him to sit and imagine being at the birth of Jesus. And it moved him so deeply, he started, while he's recovering from battle, he's imagining the smell of the place. He's imagining the baby crying, the tears, and he's taking himself to a deeper, more contemplative place. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be visualizing a situation that I'm going to set up for us. We're going to pay attention to all of the details, the sights, the sounds, the tastes, the smells, all the feelings that we have. And we're going to try to lose ourselves in this story and I want to challenge us to try to go beyond the canon of the text. Because I picked Lord of the Rings. We've all seen the movie or read the book, and so we know the text. But try to take yourself beyond just the canon of what this text is inviting us into. And if you fear your imagination is going too far, just ask yourself, is this imagination leading me closer to the spirit of the text? Or is it taking me farther away? So that's kind of the opportunity we have today. The scene I picked is, just to set it up, this is Gandalf and Frodo talking. This is the breakfast where they're gonna have a conversation about whether the ring that Frodo inherited from Bilbo is this one ring that's gonna cause so much danger. So Jon's just gonna play quietly under me. I just want you to just picture yourself in this setting. Picture yourself in this little hobbit house with this tall wizard who's probably knocking things over, just trying to make himself comfortable in here as they're having a conversation about this. And just see where this text takes you. No apparent changes came over the room. After a while, Gandalf got up, closed the shutters outside the window, and drew the curtains. The room became dark and silent. Through the clack of Sam Shear's, now nearer to the windows, could still be heard faintly from the garden. For a moment, the wizard stood looking at the fire. Then he stooped and removed the ring to the hearth with the tongs, and at once picked it up. Frodo gasped. "It is quite cool," said Gandalf. "Take it." Frodo received it on his shrinking palm. It seemed to have become thicker and heavier than ever. "Hold it up," said Gandalf, "and look closely." As Frodo did so, he now saw fine lines, finer than the finest pen strokes, running along the ring, outside and inside. Lines of fire that seemed to form the letters of a flowing script. They shone piercingly bright and yet remote, as if out of a great depth. "I cannot read the fiery letters," said Frodo in a quavering voice. "No," said Gandalf, "but I can. The letters are Elvish, of an ancient mode, but the language is that of Mordor, which I cannot and will not utter here." in this scene. One, because hobbits like to eat, they believe in second breakfasts and those things. But I also see a wizard who's really tired from a long journey. He's been gathering information for years, filling his brain and traveling back and forth, just to keep someone he cares about and a family he cares about safe. Even in talking with Frodo, I just see him so tired and worn out. He's old, he's here for a mission, but he's tired, just like a lot of us are tired. Journeys like this that take long times just aren't easy and are not simple, but yet he's determined to give Frodo the information he needs to set him up for the next pace of the journey. And with that, with all sacred times, it's important to bless people, to offer up prayers, and I bless people like Gandalf who are older in age and who have the burden of knowing, who have just seen so much of life, the good, the bad, the ugly, have had to fight the good fight for years and years and years, trying to persuade people of truths that they don't want to hear, having to advocate for things that no one really wants to listen to him about. And I just put a blessing out there for the people who are older, who are advocating, who have really been on the front lines of the good social justice movements that are happening today. And even though they maybe won't get to see it through to completion, they fought that good fight and they kept going. Amen.
Thank you. Thanks for participating. It's a different sort of situation when you have to put into it. And along those lines, we're going to try a new experiment next week where we're going to have a podcast talk. So Derek and I are going to be your host, and we're going to have a podcast with him. And we'll see how that goes. But I'm really interested in what this means to, especially for millennials now. We only have a couple Z's and a couple millennials, and then a bunch of baby boomers, and another millennial for sure. So what does it mean to have like this cross-cultural kind of work going on? It used to be in church that there were age differences, but it wasn't cross-cultural, it was the same culture. Today, that's not so much so. Millennials are pretty much a different culture, especially than baby boomers. And with the X's in between, that might be a few of you, sort of the buffer generation between those two. So today I wanted to talk with you about this idea of unity and what that looks like in these kind of cross-cultural situations. We were in a church, Michelle and I were in a church a few years ago, actually. Logan was part of that church too, that did something really well, and that was they had a unity in the church. So they had this unity thing that was just striking. I'd never really been in a place that was like this. And it was built around two ideas. One is a single mission So everybody that was a part of that church knew the mission, and everybody was on that mission. So this wasn't particularly people-driven, it was mission-driven. Does that make sense as a distinction? And so, and this mission was all-encompassing. So if you were part of the church, you were on board with this mission. And what that meant was, there was this incredible unity, because everybody was on the same page. Everybody wanted the same thing. The second way they did it was by having a leadership program where almost everybody was involved in leadership training, and it was completely hierarchical. So the lead pastor led the staff, that led the people, that led, well, life group leaders that led the people, and there was no questioning up the ranks. So it was more like a military thing in that way. So everybody was going from the single vision of the leader. And so there was great unity. Now, as you could imagine, with that wonderful unity thing, there was a cost. And that cost came out in a few ways. One is people didn't have the ability to question, because whatever the leader said went. There was no, you could make a question, but it wasn't going to go anywhere because it would get stopped early on. It would never even virtually ever get to the leader because it would get stopped somewhere along the line. So you could ask questions, but there was a prescribed answer. So there wasn't a genuine place for questions. Another disadvantage was that with this hierarchical model, certain groups were more in than other groups. And so the whole sort of goal was to get as high up in the in-group as possible. And if you were a plebeian in the lower group, well, it didn't count that much. So, here's the dilemma. Jesus talks about, in John chapter 17, he talks about this goal. Let your unity be such that everybody will look at you and say, oh, these are Jesus people. Now, that had been understood by me and by many people in the church, maybe most of the people in the church since that time, as meaning what I just talked about in that structure. That's how unity would come about. But what if that isn't what Jesus meant? What if there was another way to have unity besides being in that kind of hierarchical structure, and having just no ability to grow outside of that structure? So if you had a great idea, you could tell a leader, and it might go up a couple rungs, but the chances of it actually affecting other people was very small. So I wanted to ask you, and this may not be maybe I should ask you if I should ask you.
Oh gosh.
Do you want to chime in today, or would you rather I just talk through this? Normally I want to get your input on it.
Talk to us.
Would you rather I just talk to you today?
I mean, we'll talk back.
Okay.
One thing to add,
Wait,
Yeah.
Clay has something.
I would say, so in that kind of a system, it can quickly become a dictatorship.
Well, it does. So Clay said it could become a dictatorship in that kind of system. And absolutely it does. That's exactly what it does. And so the unity is high, but the cost is the loss of individual freedom. We should have this another mic. Should we do that? We could do it pretty easily.
Wait, are we allowed to ask questions back, or is
Sure.
it?
No, this is very.
Okay, and we haven't talked beforehand, this is maybe where you're going. But the benefit, I think you can become so unified around a single personality, this is probably a lot of cult structures as well, because you have something to pattern off of, you have something to unify around, which is the personality. So, I think we're very much figuring this out as a church. How do you unify around not something?
Yeah, great. So this would be the
Or is there
idea
something? What is it?
of unifying.
It can't be Jesus.
So ask it one more time.
I think I asked like 3 different questions. I was trying to throw you off your game.
You did good.
I nailed it. Okay. No, I think I was just asking, does there have to be something everyone unifies around, in essence? Like, for instance, cults. For instance, the church we were a part of was very much off of the charismatic personality of our leader.
Yeah, right. So there's an idea that love comes from sameness. So I'm going to get to that in a moment. In this idea, love is developed, unity is developed when there is likeness or sameness. So I'll give you an example. If you are a traveler, somebody that travels around the world, do you know who you like to be around? Other travelers. Travelers like travelers. They like to hear their stories. If you're a traveler and you're with somebody that's never traveled, you will know this experience. You start to share with them a story and the eyes glass over quickly. And then there's nothing. Because there's not that commonality, there's not sameness. So it sort of stops there. If you're a Steph Curry fan, then you want to be with people who are also Steph Curry fans. And if you don't know who Steph Curry is, then you're not one of those fans, right? Are there any other Steph Curry fans?
I know who he is.
Matthew, I thought you know. All right, yeah, we got one in here. Me too.
Hole in one.
The hole in one.
Yeah. The putt golf.
Steph Curry plays basketball. Oh, it's a joke. It's a joke. I'm sorry.
He does the hole in one golf on ABC.
Yeah, right. Great. So
Holy
you're
moly. Holy moly.
holy moly. That's right. Yeah. Awesome. So we're friends now because we have a sameness and we both like this basketball player. If you play strategy games, you like people that also play strategy games. So Logan and I do this. We have a game that we play. It's called Agricola.
Agricola.
Thank you. And so because it's a game that we like to play, some of you are role-playing game people. I don't understand those at all. Like, I know what they're doing, but I don't know. Like, Maddie, do you do that? No.
Some of my friends do though.
Yeah, and it's almost like, speaking of cults, it's almost
Oh
like...
gosh, Dad. Stop it. Calm down.
Well, I'm just saying, they get very involved in it. Not that we get involved in our strategy at all. So the closer you are, the more important the sameness is. So yeah. Great.
So really, when you ask, I know it's a little late now, but when you ask, is there something that we have in common here? And I think some of us are thinking, no, not really, but I think that there is something that we have in common, which is a common enemy. And that enemy would be hatred, discrimination on baseless, baseless things. And whether you've been directly or indirectly or all in any direct way. By people just being, ignorant, willfully ignorant and discriminatory. And that could be not the major things, but also sometimes the minor things. You get somebody and go, oh yeah, I like, Celine Dion, and they go, oh, and then all of a sudden it's like they don't even want to acknowledge that you existed. It's like, really? I'm a whole person.
Celine Dion?
That's the thing, that you're just not even going to acknowledge me as a human anymore? That doesn't make any sense. It's not like I killed your wife or something, right? That would be a good reason to not talk to somebody.
Right, yeah, and so actually, that's right where I'm going with this idea. If sameness is what causes love, then what do you do with a group like this? Where Celine Dion is probably not going to be the thing that holds us all together.
Come on now, come on.
I mean,
You're going too far, you're going too far.
We're not going to find those things.
I'll give the mic to the mic person. Pat, did you have something you wanted all of us to be talking about? We're all just saying what we... Okay, cool.
I think along with, Clay, your idea of having a common enemy, I think it comes with, we all have a common response to that as well. And I think, from what I have seen, our common response is, our goal is love and justice. And responding out of love and responding in a way that enacts justice specifically for whatever population has been oppressed.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So that would be sort of the positive spin on if the negative is we have a common enemy, the positive spin on that is we want to be common in love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that as lovers of people, what we do is we respond to the hate. We respond to the injustice. We care about that. That's why we're a justice church. Not because we hate people, but because we love people. And so, it's those who have been oppressed that we are asking justice for. We're not asking justice for those who are the oppressors. And oddly enough, that's exactly what Jesus did. What Jesus did was he went to bat for the oppressed. It was constantly, like if you look at his ministry, just read through Luke, and all it is Jesus defending and going for and loving those who had been abused, had been hurt, had been marginalized in some kind of way. And that can be a unifier. Now, what that does mean is it means letting go of a lot of things that aren't important.
Yeah.
So I'll give you some examples of things that we don't want the church to be.
The height of the pulpit.
Yeah. There was a church that had asked me to be their worship pastor. And it was a more conservative church. And they had asked me to be the worship pastor, and I thought, oh, this would be great. I'd love to do this. And so I did want to make sure that we were on the same page. So I wrote to the pastor and said, I'd love to be a part of this, but I want to make sure that we agree on things that are cultural and things that are, for lack of a better word, important. So I said, can we agree that the kind of music we do is a cultural question. It's not a religious question. It's a cultural question. And one of the things was, can we agree that the height of the pulpit is a cultural question? It's not a,
Maybe explain what a pulpit is.
so, in some churches, these pulpits are bigger or higher than in others. And you may or may not have sort of looked at that in churches in those kinds of ways. So, we said this in the letter, can we just agree that the height of the pulpit is a cultural matter? Well, lo and behold, the next Sunday, for children's service, the pastor called up the children and said, do any of you want to know why our pulpit is the tallest piece of furniture in our church? True story. And he gave a religious reason, because the preaching of the word is what's most important. And so we make the height of the pulpit higher than any other piece of furniture. And I realized, okay, this isn't going to be a good match. He thinks that that's what's important, the height of the pulpit. Well, I mean, this is our pulpit, right? Because we don't care. That's not a value for us. We're way more concerned about the plight of the marginalized and the oppressed, and doing things in cross-cultural ways than being right about the height of the pulpit. So that's where that comment came from. Yeah, so that is something that we're not going to care a lot about. Other things that we don't want to spend a lot of time on. So here would be some. How we do the opening music time. We're great with all kinds of different ways that could look like. In fact, what the sermon looks like, we're great with all kinds of different ways that could look like. Because that's not a big value for us. All right, so sort of follow me here. What if it is true that love is from sameness? Then how, when we're having such a diverse group, how do we create love? So one idea is that we rally around what we are about, which is, I'd like to suggest that what we are about is love. And I know that sounds so cop-out-ish. So, what would be a word for it?
Radical inclusion.
Yeah, so we would be about radical inclusivity, right? That would be something that we would really care about. So here's the problem. If love is sameness and we believe in radical inclusivity, which means all kinds of different things, then how do those two work together? Everybody see my dilemma? If unity, if love is about being alike, and what we really care about is diversity, then how do those work together?
I guess I reject that premise that love is about sameness.
Yeah, go with it, tell me more.
Don't even,
Don't need that. Woo!
this feels uncomfortable. This is for people who aren't here?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I reject that love is about sameness. From all sorts of perspectives, variety being the spice of life, that the world is so varied that God is revealed in so many different ways and forms, and the immenseness of the creation is so varied. I want to be the home where I'm excited and I'm going to travel, whether I'm out there or not. just in gender and sex relations. What, that everyone would only be with their own kind? No. I don't want to be in a church that everyone is the same. I want it to be as varied as our community is.
Yeah, so what if you mentioned the traveler idea. What if I get to experience other countries because you're a traveler? So say you're not a traveler. If you were with somebody that was, you could learn, you could become better because you were with somebody that was different than you.
True, and I can come to know more of the world through the traveler.
Exactly.
I don't have to travel myself.
That's right. Yeah.
I can travel, my body can travel or my mind can travel, hopefully both.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So I just want to keep going with the idea. So let's say we have a diverse age group. What does that mean for us? Do we want all the same age group?
I don't.
Right, no, why not?
Because we can learn so much from all ages. Just in his opening bit, talking about Gandalf and the prayer for those who are so tired from having fought the good fight in their journeys. There's so much to learn from the elders. There's so much joy that the children give to us and bring to us, and that we can learn from their experience. The things that we've forgotten from being children, the innocence, the excitement, the ways that they can open our eyes. Your wife today was talking about how comforting it was to be in the church with people that understood where she was in her time of life. There's just so many gifts that can be brought to us from people at the different stages in their lives, or, that doesn't just have to be age, it can just be socioeconomic status,
That's right.
different experiences.
And you mentioned even different sexual orientations, different gender identities, that there's a whole spectrum of all of these things, that if we limit ourselves to this is who we are, we miss all of this beauty of who God is.
True.
Yeah, and I'm right with you. In fact, you sort of preached the second half of what I was going to talk about. I'm right there. So here's the idea. What if the sameness isn't how we are with each other, but what if the sameness is being actually like God? That kind of sameness. Sameness as in God cares about everyone. We could be on board with that kind of sameness, right? Or God created diversity in everything, so we should love diversity in everything. That's the kind of sameness we could get about, right? Yeah.
Are you talking about sameness in the direction that we're headed? As in, the common goal among us is to become more like God and to love the things that they love. So on that journey, we are headed, we're headed towards a common goal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So,
because that's what our album is about this year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Don't tell anybody.
Don't tell
It's
anybody.
a secret.
All right. Our lips are sealed here.
It's called Homebound.
Homebound? Wow. Maddie's really involved in the album. Are you what are you?
So I'm I'm just in the band and on the songwriting team. Danny is the co-producer. Yeah, and they're head of songwriting team as well. And we recently just kind of modified the theme to fit more of like the direction that we're in and what we're writing. So yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, so in this sort of this direction idea, what we want to be, and this is actually in the Bible, right? We want to be like Christ. So what did Christ do? Did he pick people that were all like him? No, right? Look at the disciples, who are very, some of them are like him, but not most of them. Or the early church. And here was the big one. The early church said, what if Gentiles were fully in? Talk about a scandal. It split the church. This is the early church, and it split it wide open. Can Gentiles be a part of the church? And what did God say? He spoke through Peter, and he said, don't make anything unclean that I have made clean. Can I suggest that the LGBTQ issues of today are very similar to the Gentile issues of that day? Can we all agree that Jews and Gentiles are of equal value? That there isn't one that's right and wrong, another one wrong? They're equal. Today we are in a very similar situation where the churches want to say, no, because you're not like us, you can't be a part of us. Because their sameness is exclusive.
Yeah.
Jesus' sameness is definitionally inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So when he says sameness, what he's meaning is we love everyone. All people are of equal value.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but in all of the world that he created, there's diversity in every bit of it. Name a part of his creation where there isn't diversity. Oh, like flower. Wait, no, that has diversity. Like mountain. No, that has diversity. Butterfly. No. Everything has diversity that he created. Should it be shocking to us that the church is supposed to be full of diversity so that we can love well, so that the sameness of love is in the church? Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if that's what we're gonna land on, like if we're gonna be unified around our common direction and pursuit of this goal, then I do think there is one requirement that everyone would have to meet in order to be unified around that idea, and that is like acknowledging and agreeing on the fact that we haven't arrived yet, and that we're still in process.
Absolutely. I think that's terrific. We're reading a book in Beaumont Presbyterian Church in the Sunday school called Dear White Peacemakers. And it's a book by an African-American lady who talks about this idea of we have not arrived in an anti-racist society. We live in a society ridden, is that the right word? Racism? Riddled? I like that. Yeah. Riddled with racism. Needs to be an R word, so that works. We have a long way to go. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. So, here would be an example. Do we ever get to be all the way like Christ? Now, there would be a whole group of people that would say, when we get to heaven, then we'll be like him and everything is like we know all of our answers. I just think that's I don't want to say, I don't think that's a good answer at all. It's riddled with problems.
Keep using it. It'll work out at some point.
I think in heaven we get to really begin our growth to be like Christ. If that's true, if we get to forever become more like Him without ever arriving, in fact, as you've heard me say, I think, we could increase the speed at which we are becoming like Him forever and never reach Him. That's how good the God that we love is. That's His goodness. The love of God is that great that we would never arrive. If we can agree on that, surely we can agree that we can become, that we're on a journey to fully embrace what it means to be inclusive, to fully embrace what it means to be loving. No, I think that's great, man. Absolutely.
Would you say the obstacle to this inclusivity, this sameness that you're talking about, is that because we have turned faith into dogma, meaning we're so certain about what we believe and we're so set in what it is, and this can be the only way, like, you have to believe these core principles, so it's that concept of right thinking first rather than belonging first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think that's the only obstacle, but I think it's one of the big ones, and probably the biggest one in the church. The church has always said, right belief is what gets you in. And we absolutely say that is not true. That is not the litmus test of being in.
Because there's an argument to be made, because especially in early Christian days, they did embrace more mystery in their faith. Like, they didn't know and they didn't pretend to have set answers.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, faith equals uncertainty, and the latter is dogma.
That's right.
Which they worked against.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And I believe that's absolutely true. Dogma is the enemy of true inclusivity. Yeah. We're always learning. We're always changing. We're always growing. And if we're not, then we are on the wrong path. We're not going the right direction. I want to just end with this one thought. It's the thought that love is about knowing and being known. So love between two people is about knowing the person and being known by the person. Now, there are other things involved. But if that's true, what that means is that diversity, our differences, give us the opportunity to grow in love for each other. And so I'm going to go with this idea of learn to love what those you love. That when we can do that, when we can learn to love what those you love, then we can have true unity, not based on a hierarchy, and not based on some kind of assent to a mission, but based on actual love, which is what God is. And that's our goal. Let's be known and know both God and each other. And along those lines, we're going to take communion now. So anyone that wants to, you don't have to at all, but everyone is for sure welcome. There's juice back there and crackers. Just go ahead and get one. You have instructions, Lisa? Okay. Just go back and you can get those and just bring them up with you, and we're going to take them together. As we take this, That's what we've got. This is the bread of Christ, who is the life of the world. And he said, I'm the bread of life. This is it. Jesus filling us, nourishing us, and inviting us into his life of love for all. And we take this Greek immunity, part of the body of Christ, part of the love of Christ, who fills us, who makes us unified, not in any way except in our love. I want to thank all of you for participating, being a part of this. You know, speaking of the dogma, we're trying to figure all this out. There's so much we don't know. Like, we know a few things, but mostly we're just trying to figure this out. And it's way better to figure it out with other people. Doing it together. We'll take that. We'll take that every time. So thanks for being a part of that. Right now, today, this place.